Good evening. I call the regular meeting of the Ames City Council for Tuesday night, October 12th to order. Good evening, Council. David? And Zoom? We'll move right into consent agenda. Does anyone wish to pull any item from consent this evening? Hearing none, I entertain a motion to move consent.
Move consent.
Second?
Thank you. Roll call.
Fletcher,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Corey,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
Katie Hansen.
Aye.
Thank you. Moving on to public forum. This is a time we set aside for comments from the public on topics of city business other than those listed on the agenda. We ask people to limit their comments to 3 minutes or less, and I have one person indicating interest at this point, and that is Richard Dio. Richard? Yes.
I was sort of hoping to go on number 30, the ordinances for the resident police advisory committee. You know, because I kind of figure it's like after that one meeting, you guys, I asked Jeff Hoff, you know, how to change a bunch of dumb, stupid, and asinine laws. And Jeff Hoff says, democracy in action.
Well, Richard,
And I wanted to
the reason I'm asking for it in a public forum is that it's actually a third reading tonight and adoption. And so we do not take public input. So I'm going to give you the opportunity to go ahead and offer input on that under public forum if you wish.
Well, a couple of years ago for my birthday one year, I wanted to put an ad in the Tribune that said the government should do as all the citizens love. And I went in there and I talked to Gordon Schrader or whatever his name was, who was in the advertising department of the head of the advertising department of the Tribune at the time. And he didn't understand my ad and said, come back tomorrow. And I did, and come back the next day. And I did, and come back on Monday. And I did. And I mean, it said the government should do as all the citizens love. And it's like I love, and send a copy to all citizens, all addresses, the right town and the zip. And he had me talk to David Kramer, who was the editor of the Tribune at the time. And I talked with him, and Mr. Kramer basically babbled on, do I want to listen to you? And it's like, who are you? And it's like, when he asked me things about the government, you know, I was talking about we were at war in Iraq at the time, and I saw this documentary in which this one town in Iraq brought out box after box of thick bundles of $100 bills and poured it right in front of the American GIs, and then poured gasoline on it, and then took a match and burned it. And it's like, do you love anyone in Iraq? Do you love anyone in America? Do you love yourselves? Do you love your paychecks? Does somebody pay you guys to come to our town to make yourselves look like a public nuisance? We love you Americans. It's your God we don't give a damn for. Richard, you guys God?
You want to talk about, you have about a minute and a half left. If you want to talk about the democracy in action, you're welcome to do so.
Nowadays, they try to get people to behave like computers and computers to behave like people. And I've gone to the hospital board and before COVID happened. And I was so hurt by some of the people in this community. You know, I told them to kill me. You know, I was so hurt.
Richard, please, anything regarding city business, please. Are you done?
Can I be naked in my own apartment when I'm the only one in
Richard,
it?
it's not city business.
I mean, Corey,
Richard, please. Thank you. Does anybody else wants to address council under a public forum tonight? Actually, your grant, right?
Yes, sir.
We'll call you up on item 25, okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
That's germane to that item. Thank you. Anybody else? All right, we will close public forum and move on to item number 20, presentation of 2021 resident satisfaction survey result. Susan?
All right, good evening. It's good to be back here again, 1 year later, to go over our resident satisfaction survey for 2021. There's a lot of information, a lot of pages to digest. So I did write down a few things, so I'm sure that I covered the information thoroughly and answer any questions you might have. It was an unusual year to take a survey, and we had some unusual results in some ways, but overall, it was pretty consistent with previous years. There we go. Okay. For nearly 4 decades, the City of Ames has commissioned an annual satisfaction survey to generate relevant, usable data to guide decision-making prior to heading into budgeting. And for the last decade, the report has been produced by Nora Lajahazen with assistance from Amy Logan with the Institute for Design Research and Outreach, which is housed in the Iowa State University College of Design. So let's start out with who gets the survey. It goes to 1,350 utility bill customers, and 1,000 email surveys are sent to ISU students. This year in 2021, we had 600 return surveys. That is down. In 2020, we had 804. We had a response rate of 22% for non-students, and those are people who receive by U.S. mail a 12-page packet, and 54% for students, which is online. And so you can tell that what we have to do is balance the surveys, so we don't always use the entire amount of ISU surveys. We balance them against the paper copies. It did occur to me that you probably have never seen the survey before, so I brought some of the packet. So every survey comes with a cover letter from the mayor. The survey itself is 12 pages. So when you sit down to fill this out, it's a lot of writing. And to thank you for filling it out, we always include a coupon as an incentive gift. You can a free entry to the pool or $2 off, a book at the library, and an entry form, which is another incentive to participate. And every year the mayor draws 2 winners to receive a gift certificate. And we did that this year and sent those off. And so people really do win. So for the second year, we have provided an online option for people who get the paper copy. They can, instead of writing out their answers, go online, enter a code, and fill it out digitally. And we had 35 people who did that this year. Okay, so the timing of the survey. The survey this year went out in May. People got it the first week in May. They were to return it by the end of May, but we continue to actually accept surveys through June, usually cutting off right around the 4th of July. There were no survey question changes made to the 2021 survey, so it stayed exactly the same as 2020. And after tonight, I will put this year's survey on the city website under the city manager's office, where you can find digital copies of the survey going back to 2008. Okay, so let's get into some of the data. So this question asked residents about their program and service priorities for those paid for by sales or property taxes. So as we can see, as in previous years, most respondents would like to keep funding at exactly the same level. Respondents were asked, should the city spend more, less, or the same? And that column in the middle, the number 2, it's the same. That That has more than 50% of respondents, as it has for several years. So what you see at the end is the average. If you give each of those values a 1, 2, or 3, those that average higher than 2 have more respondents who wanted an increase than a decrease. But just to reiterate, spend the same in 10 out of 10 categories. 54 to 87% of respondents said the same. Our of the average rankings, those programs that got the highest rankings were the arts, fire protection, human service funding, and law enforcement. So the next thing that we looked at is preferred property tax adjustments for the next year. We kind of pay a lot of attention to the middle bar, the red bar, which is the no change. So we ask our respondents each year, are you willing to have a decrease, an increase, or no change? And we see, again, the most people are sticking to that middle, that no change was 54% of respondents. It was 51% in 2020. So the number of people who were interested in an increase was actually down by 4%. And the number of people who suggested a decrease is the way to go was up by 1%. So when you add together the decrease and the no change respondents, you're getting about 82%. I think that's kind of a reflection of some of the instability that we've seen this past year and some of the uncertainty. And so we'll continue to watch that. The number in the increase in the green is the lowest it's been in at least the last 5 years. And I could look back and further, it's pretty low. Okay, next is the capital improvements priorities. Under the capital improvement priorities, the same top 3 have dominated for more than 5 years. That was reconstructing existing streets, traffic flow improvements, and stormwater drainage improvements had been the top 5 for at least, or the top 3 for at least the past 5 years. But this year, following the pandemic, the derecho, and the drought, stormwater drainage fell out of the top 3 and was replaced by improvements to existing parks. So I, purely speculating on what might be a cause on that, I did talk a little bit to our water department. Story County has been identified as being in a severe drought by the Iowa Drought Monitoring System for most of 2021. And then we also have a lot of anecdotal evidence of park usage being up over the pandemic. So where people are not seeing a lot of stormwater issues right now, they may not be thinking about that when they take their survey, but they may be at the parks. So this will be a good question to watch in future surveys. Why did we lose stormwater drainage? And why did we see an increase in a different topic? So just again, to reiterate, the top 3 for this survey were the reconstructing existing streets, traffic flow improvements, and improvements to existing parks. Okay, a summary this is a summary of satisfaction with city services with removing the don't know. In 2021, the levels of satisfaction were exactly the same as last year in 8 out of 9 categories. Law enforcement services decreased very slightly, and overall the rates do remain high. So when examined over time, we look for trends or significant changes in response. So a couple that I am kind of paying attention to, we're seeing an upward trend in parks and recreation and a slightly downward trend in public nuisance. So we'll keep watching those to see what happens next year. But that's why it's nice to see the longitudinal evidence. Here's an example of some other results we don't necessarily expect. Did you experience a power outage last year? So we see suddenly a huge jump. This is one of those things that we believe is tied to the experiences we've had as a community this past year after the derecho. Lots of people experienced a power outage, so we don't expect a similar result for next year. Information dissemination. We talk a lot about civic engagement, about doing outreach to the community. Those surveyed in this question were asked to choose one preferred method for communications about construction projects, programs, meetings, and other news in their area. Because communication is important, we continue to explore different methods of outreach. In this example letter and email were the most favored methods of communication at 27%. followed by door hanger, city website, Facebook, newspaper, Twitter, radio, and other. That is different from Iowa State students who responded that email is the best way to communicate, followed by letter, website, Facebook, door hanger, Twitter, newspaper, and radio. So we're definitely seeing a trend that continues year after year away from traditional media and an increase in tools where the city connects directly with residents. Now, that doesn't mean that that's how we'll reach every resident, but we're definitely seeing the increase that some people are showing the preference for different types of communication and outreach. Okay, a couple of years ago, I think this is our 4th year for adding some health and belonging questions. For community integration and sense of belonging, the percentage of respondents who replied favorably increased from 2020 for every question. However, some of the averages, that column at the end, were lower, indicating that participants are leaning towards agreement, but are not feeling as strongly about it as in the previous year. Respondents were asked what would make them feel welcome and give them a sense of belonging in Ames, and many respondents said they already felt welcomed and have a sense of belonging. The next slide is a word cloud of some of those popular responses. So these are some of the questions that are included in the survey, and when you look at the analysis, you can read pages and pages and pages of comments. Over the years, the council has asked for more open-ended questions to be included in the survey, and there are about 75 pages in the appendix that are divided in a lot of different ways that answer these questions and give you a little bit more information. Another question that was in this health and belonging section was self-reporting. How healthy do you feel? And this slide suggests that we're seeing a bit of a decline last year in how people are self-reporting their health. So you can see over time that has gone down. The number of people reporting excellent health and the number has decreased, while the number of people suggesting that their health is poor or fair has increased a little bit. Again, we'll look at that one over time to see where that trajectory goes. And is it a trend or is it just an anomaly this year? Finally, we end the survey with trends in satisfaction with overall City of Ames service quality. Each year, survey respondents are asked to give an overall evaluation of the quality of services they received from the City of Ames, as well as provide additional comments. This year, 41% of respondents provided the City of Ames a very good rating, which is exactly the same as last year's result in 2020. The number of respondents who rated the City of Ames good actually went up 1% to 55%. Went up 1% to 56%. It was 55% last year, which gives us a combined total of 97% of Ames residents ranking their overall satisfaction with city services as good or very good. So despite the year and all of its challenges, I think we ended up on a really high note. Here's a word cloud again on what the city should focus on. Again, it just offered residents an opportunity to throw out some ideas and things they were interested in. What was the best thing about Ames? That's always a fun thing to read. 415 responses, including safety, access to parks, it's a large city with a small town feel. The university, people continue to talk about the connection and partnerships with the university. And then there's just simply the people of Ames. And what would make Ames a fun and vibrant community received 264 responses that focused a lot on community festivals, events, economic development, investment in recreational facilities and activities, and some infrastructure development. And that is your summary of the 2021 Resident Satisfaction Survey results.
Thank you, Susan. Questions or comments?
Can I ask a question?
Oh,
I'm surprised that the ratings were as high as they were and that we didn't see the anomalies I think we were expecting to see after last year and everything that happened.
Just a reminder, in January or February, I come to the council and ask them to consider questions for the 2022 survey. So start thinking about what you might want to see. I think we have some space and some room to move things around. And this is always a great opportunity. If you have ideas or things that need a little bit more exploration, we can certainly visit them in the survey.
some ways, this is a report card on how our city staff is doing. So,
Correct.
Steve, pass on. You think the well-earned congratulations to your staff for getting that kind of report card.
I think we're very proud of it, given the pandemic and how we try to maintain services in a very difficult situation. And I think our citizens understood that too, and were patient with us, and we tried to do the best we could. And I think they recognize it, and we appreciate it very much.
I think it's very gratifying that so many students respond to.
Yes, it's a long survey, and they really do take the time to fill out their surveys. Just a clarification point. Sometimes when you're reading, and the mayor and I were talking about this earlier, when you're reading the appendix, sometimes the comments seem a little nonsensical or they don't quite make sense. Just to explain a little bit more about how that process works, when you fill out a digital survey, that information digitally is dropped into the database. But when you fill out a handwritten survey, students have to go through that survey and do the data input. Sometimes they have difficulty reading, writing, and they make the best guess that they can make. Sometimes it truly is illegible and they don't know what to write. So sometimes I read the comments and I'm not quite sure I've got the gist of what somebody is saying, but we include it just in case it might make sense to somebody else. So that's why you might see some things in the appendix that look a little odd.
Very good. Thank you, Susan. All right, moving on to item 21, motion directing staff to negotiate long-term land lease with Heartland Senior Services as requested for consolidation of 2 lots at 205 South Walnut. Steve?
Well, as you know, we work with Heartland Senior Services over the past years to try to have us partner with them on the Healthy Life Center. Well, that particular venture failed, unfortunately, but there's no doubt that there's a need for a new building for Heartland. Actually, the building there is now, you may not remember this, but it was actually an old grade school. It was purchased with CDBG funds, and they've used that facility for many, many years, many decades actually, to provide the kind of services we need for our elderly, daycare services for our elderly in the community. That building has reached its useful life, and they're trying to move on their own now to get a new building and provide those excellent services to our citizens. So their strategy now is to build on the existing site. That site, because it's owned by the city of Ames, then will need your approval. It's as Mark has informed us, we cannot just give the site to this particular entity. So I think the strategy we're going to have is that if you allow this, we will develop a long-term lease with Heartland Senior Services to continue to provide the services to the community. In return, we'll make sure that that site is only used for that type of service and that service only for the length of the lease. And therefore, in consideration for maybe a very nominal fee of $1 for 50 years, they'll continue to provide the service to the community. That's what we'll get in return. I don't know if you have any specific questions. All we're asking now is 2 things. To accomplish this, for them to build a new building, they have a piece of property that is adjacent to our land that we own, that they'll need both those combined to build a new building. So they're asking or requesting the council accept ownership of the new building. That will require us to have a plat of survey and combine those 2 lots into one. They would then be both the city property, and then the city would come back with you with a lease, then a long-term lease for them to build a building on. So Nancy Carroll, the executive director, is here. If you have any questions of us, how it would work, what you're doing, you're just authorizing us to develop a lease. We'll come back with a lease and all the requirements in it. Mark will develop a very nice lease for them, and we'll be back with you if you want us to proceed with that.
Questions?
I think our Heartland facility currently, I think the way you described it is correct. It's outlived its useful life. I don't think it describes accurately our value for our senior members of our community. So it provides a very essential service, and I think having a facility that is updated will better reflect our community's values. So I think it's wonderful.
All right, entertain motion.
I would move alternative 1, that we direct staff to prepare a long-term land lease with Heartland Senior Services as requested for approximately 1 acre of 205 South Walnut.
Thank you.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. All right, moving on to item 22, staff report on artistically painted fire hydrants. Brian and Chief Higgins.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We'll just take a few minutes on this item. This is in response to the council's direction to gather feedback from city staff about the concept of an artistic fire hydrant painting program. You requested back in June that we get feedback from the fire department and Public Works and also the Public Art Commission about the prospect for such a program and any concerns that we might have about it. So we have put together the responses to that in the staff report. There are some concerns that we do have about such a program, including maintaining the operability of fire hydrants, the visibility of them, the scale of such a program and managing it and ensuring that we don't have unauthorized painting that we don't know about, as that might impact our operations, and then maintaining the artistic paint if it was to be implemented. Additionally, we spoke with the Public Art Commission. At this time, they have a number of initiatives on the table for them. And so they've indicated at their meeting last week that they preferred not to take on the administration of such a program. I'll turn it over to Rich for comments he might have about just the from a user standpoint of fire hydrants. Rich?
Yeah, good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this matter. So in Ames, we're lucky to have a great water distribution system. John Dunn and John Joyner and his team have done an outstanding job making sure that we have adequate water when there is a fire. And we also have uniformity in the city. So NFPA standard, it's 291, allows fire hydrants to be painted a different color if you have different water flow requirements. In the city of Ames, we have a great distribution system, so that's not a big concern when we show up on scene. So the city can adopt a local standard that allows them to be painted a different color, which we have done through SUDAS. It's a green color. As you drive through town, you'll notice that our fire hydrants are green. That creates uniformity. And in the fire service, uniformity equals safety, which equals efficiency. So when we pull up on scene, we want to spend very short amount of time trying to locate a fire hydrant. We want to spend more time trying to make sure that everybody's out of the property and make sure that the fire isn't going to go any further than what it has already. So having the hydrants all one color, the green color that they have, that makes it really easy to train our firefighters to look for a fire hydrant when they're pulling up on scene. They know exactly what they're looking for. They spend very little time in doing that. So uniformity equals safety equals efficiency. At this point in time, we have no desire to start changing the colors of our hydrants in our community.
So we have a couple of options in front of you. One option would be to not proceed with a hydrant painting program at this time. The other would be to direct staff and Public Art Commission to implement a program. And if that option is chosen, then I think we would have to come back to you and get some prioritization of the Public Art Commission's work. We also have the situation that the original requester proceeded with painting the fire hydrant adjacent to his house. And so we need some direction from the city council about what to do with that. It would be our expectation, I suppose, of the options. If the council doesn't want to implement a program, then I think we would proceed with painting that fire hydrant back to the standard color. If the council does want to implement a program, then perhaps we could leave that fire hydrant painted as is until we have a program in place and the parameters for it.
And our preference is what?
Our preference, because of the reasons that we've outlined in the staff report, and our I guess the other priorities that Public Art Commission has right now, our preference would be not to initiate the program at this time and to go ahead and proceed with repainting the hydrant before it becomes too cold to do so.
Right.
Brian or Chief, does our Ames city ordinance speak to people's ability to paint fire hydrants?
It does. There are two sections that would relate to this. We have a section specifically about interfering with hydrants. So any person who interferes with the operation of a hydrant and they're not authorized to do so, and that includes unscrewing the caps or interfering or meddling with a hydrant in any manner. That ordinance prohibits that kind of activity. And also, of course, applying paint to a piece of equipment that is not your own property is probably rises to the level of criminal mischief, 5th degree, depending on the cost to repair it. We would expect that it would probably be in the neighborhood of $100 or a couple $100 to go out and remove the paint and reapply the correct paint, since it was done without authorization. So there are a couple of areas, both state law and then our own city ordinances, that speak to unauthorized tinkering with fire hydrants.
Questions, comments? Is there a motion?
Move alternative 1, option 1, do not implement a fire hydrant painting program at this time.
And would that also include anything regarding the fire hydrant which has been painted?
I was going to do a second motion on
Okay,
that.
that's fine. Thank you. All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion?
Could you explain what you just said? I heard the motion, but the second motion is going to be regarding what?
How to deal with the fire hydrant that was painted without authorization by the fire department?
I'm sorry, Tim, that question was for you, I think.
Oh, yeah. So I thought it'd be best to divide these. And so I intend on offering a second motion as far as what to do with the existing painted fire hydrant.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. All right, Tim.
I'm sorry, was there a call for nay? I want to vote nay.
Okay, yes, there was. Motion passed 5-1.
Thank you.
So in general, we try to give warnings to people and not issue citations where we can. And so I don't think a citation is necessarily the pathway to go here. So I would move that we direct staff to repaint the fire hydrant.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion? Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carried.
Mayor, I'm sorry, I can't hear you if you're speaking.
Sorry, David. Is that better?
Apparently not.
It's by design, David. No, just kidding.
You heard that?
Can you hear us, David?
Say something, Rachel. Or
Can you hear us over here, David?
Yeah, I can hear you over there. Great.
Well, this is a problem. All right.
All right, so is it okay if I just say some comments after these votes? I think I understand what we just voted on.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, so I voted against the option 1 simply because I think the gist of it was that we never pursue a fire hydrant painting program. I know that's not what the motion actually exactly said, but I do think that it's worth revisiting after the Public Art Commission has capacity to do it. There's no point in asking them to do it now. And so I would be interested in looking into that in the future. And we do have to take the fire department's concerns about it seriously. I just think that we haven't plumbed that issue deeply enough yet for me to be convinced that this is a totally unworkable idea in every form. So I think it's fine to not pursue it now. And I think it makes sense to revert the doggy hydrant to a green one. I think that makes sense now. But I do hope that next year, when you're looking at future projects, you will consider doing this again. Thank you.
Can you hear me now, David?
I did hear you just say that. Did something change?
Yes, I was told that the speaker or the microphone for this transmission's in the owl, not in my microphone itself. So I moved one of the speakers closer to me, so. That makes sense? Did you hear that?
Yes, I did. And it does sound better. Thank you very much.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 23, discussion regarding adoption of new wards and precincts following state redistricting. Mark?
Good evening. Well, the legislature is in the process of redistricting. That's drawing the new lines for the congressional districts from Iowa, and then the state legislative districts, the Iowa House and the Iowa Senate. So that's done every 10 years after census, and usually all this happens in the spring. But in this case, the census numbers were delayed. We didn't get them until September, and so the legislature has been working on it. There's a process where they can get 3 different plans one at a time, and they voted down the first plan on October 5th. The next plan, it's said, will be done on October 21st. And if they adopt that, we have a little more time for doing the drawing of new wards and precincts in the city of Ames, which is the council's responsibility. And if the legislature votes down the second plan and goes to the third plan, we're probably looking at the second week of November for them to adopt the third and final redistricting plan, which gives us a very short time frame because the wards and precincts at both the city and county level have to be done before January 15th, according to Iowa law, unless the legislature extends that, and it doesn't sound like they're going to. So very short time frame. And so my memo was just to kind of give you an overview of the process and give you a heads up that that this is coming and that we will need to act pretty expeditiously. And in talking with Lucy Martin, the Story County auditor, she said that their plan, once the legislature has acted, is to draw wards and precincts for the entire county. And that's because she said, it's just easier for them to plot out the whole county when doing this rather than, trying to leave out Ames and just do the rest of the county. The city council of Ames still has the responsibility for drawing those lines within the city limits of Ames, but precincts have to fit within a state legislative district. So, and that's so that when you show up at the polls, you know who you're voting for this state legislative race. It's not like, well, if you live on these streets, you're going to get this ballot, and on these streets you get another ballot. There can just be one ballot per precinct that way. So it's important that that is taken into consideration. There are other rules about, precincts can't be more than 3,500 people. The wards have to be all approximately the same size, as close as possible to the same size. There's 4 wards in the city of Ames. It looks like there will still be 4 wards. So you take the latest census numbers, which were 66,000 something, and divide that by 4, and that's the approximate size of each each ward, and then the precincts are drawn to fit into those wards. So anyway, so there is software that's available. The Iowa Secretary of State's office purchased software and has made it available to all the cities and counties for doing what they call the re-precincting, drawing the wards and precincts. So we have that available. Ben McConville is our GIS person. He's gone through training on that, and he's prepared to prepare a map for the city of Ames. So, and really, I offered some options here, and I'm actually going to add a fourth option. But the options are, number one, wait until we see the map that Story County produces. Again, they're doing that as a courtesy. We do not have to adopt that map, and then decide whether want to go with that or want the city staff to prepare a separate map for you to consider. Decide now to have the staff go ahead and prepare a second map. Decide now that the council plans to proceed with just adopting the Story County Auditor's map. And then what I should have put in as a fourth is decide now just to have the city staff draw a map and kind of, not look at the county map, just draw our own map. So those are the options that are available. I recommended that we wait until we see what the county has produced, because maybe that's just looks fine and the council wants to adopt it, so and then it would save staff time in putting together the city map. But that's just kind of my take on it. You may feel differently, and I totally understand that. So anyway, it's I'm here to answer questions and look forward to hearing your discussion.
I have a couple of questions. I don't know if this is for Steve or for Mark. Historically, could you fill in the gaps? I mean, historically, when we've done this, have we had other people draw the maps, or has the city drawn the maps itself?
Mark,
we've got in our database from 10 years ago when this was done, and Doug Merrick was the city attorney, and it looks like they drew the maps here.
We did.
The city did, yeah.
And could you give us a sense of what's involved? Is this a burdensome process, or does the system just sort of take the data and spit out a map? What's the level of staff commitment?
Yeah, I talked that through with Ben today, and he said really it's they've got the census blocks, which are the smaller areas that the census defines, and you can draw the lines and it along the census block lines, which is what state law requires, and develop the precincts and the wards that way. There's some of the rules that apply. For example, no precinct can be more than 3,500 people. That has to be input into the system, because this is a nationwide software that's being used all over the place. So there are places where you can input rules like that. So and then the system, the software, as I understand it, will draw the lines and sort of give you a map. Ben was guessing. I asked him how long it would take to do this. He was guessing about a day and a half, maybe, of work to, and that's his work on it. Now, no matter which one we do, my office is going to have a lot of work writing the ordinance, where we have to describe, start at this intersection and go south and then turn west, and and like describe each of these in words, and we'll have that to do anyway. We'll look at it. So that will take a few days of sort of devoted effort and double checking to make sure we've got all the streets correct and all the borders correct in them. So we'll like I said, we have that either way. So but anyway, Ben said a day, maybe a day and a half to do this.
Great, thanks.
I have a question.
Yes.
So if I'm trying to understand what level of direction we could or would give in preparing these maps. For example, if council were to just decide that we would like the city staff to prepare the maps, and that's all we said, would we have any reason to expect that the resulting maps would be different than what the county would produce? Or is, there might be a difference just because it's slightly random and different people might make different detailed decisions, but is there anything else going on there?
I can't imagine that it would be much different. I mean, there might be slight differences between the two maps. I can't imagine it will be significantly different. I mean, all the wards are going to have approximately the same amount of people in all 4 wards. So, that sort of limits you. And, the wards have to be contiguous and have to be compact. So you can't draw a ward and have it turn a corner, and they have to be all together as much as possible. So given those constraints, I don't think that there will be a huge difference between something that someone else comes up with and something that the city would come up with. But there may be some minor differences, but again, I don't think it'd be extreme.
What sort of time constraint would we be under if we waited for the Story County map and then had the city develop one afterwards?
Well, they expect it to be done within a week to 2 weeks after the legislature finally acts and adopts the state plan. So we would, Ben thinks he can do it in a day and a half. So, and we would work together on that. I think within a couple of weeks, we should be able to have a map done by the staff. And if we started right away, as soon as the legislature acted, we could have ours done probably within a week or so. Yeah.
Other questions or comments from Mark? Is there a motion?
I'll move that we direct staff to begin preparation of a map.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved to second. Discussion?
I'd rather wait and see what the auditor yields, I guess.
So here's part of my dilemma on this. This is not something that we've ever done before. So let's imagine we've got county map over here and we have our city map here. What would be the basis for comparing those? How would we make value determinations of which neighborhood, maybe I like this neighborhood and I want it in mine. And so I really value the nonpartisan aspect of this, but I just, from a pragmatic perspective, I don't know how you would go about meaningfully comparing maps. Historically, we've always done it this way. I'd like to make this a staff-driven exercise. And so I just don't know what we would even do with someone else's configuration. I just think we should do our own.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I understand what you're saying. I think I believe staff's recommendation there that that we could wait and see what the county yields before we make them go to the work of producing a map. So,
Any other comments? All right. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
nay.
Okay. Motion failed.
I'll move alternative 1.
I'll second.
Okay. Discussion?
I already did my
I
decision.
think I agree with Tim that I'm having difficulty understanding how if we end up looking at a map, just whether we would decide whether we like it or not, because it just really seems like there isn't much for us to decide. It's just whether it fits the legal rules or not. It's hard for me to imagine anything else. But I don't see the harm in having someone else do the work. And as long as we don't see like there's a glaring problem or that they got it wrong, they're not following the actual rules for some reason, some objective reason, then I think we could go with what they do and we can save the work. I guess that's where I am.
Thank you. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Any abstaining? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. All right, moving on to item 24, staff report on Ames 2040 plan comments.
Good evening, City Council. Tonight, we are here in response to public comment that we received during the month of September. And as I outlined in our staff report, what we're really here for tonight is for you to have a chance to see the public comment. If there's any redirection necessary, we really want to hear that tonight. We did get comments about the maps themselves for land use designation purposes, and staff has some other edits we want to make to the map after we heard a few different comments and kind of reassess like how do certain commercial districts fit, how do different areas actually get mapped. So we're going to come back next meeting with some specific map recommendations for changes. But in the set of comments you received with this report, you also had some people identify issues that they had. Overall, we got about 30 different comments in total through the different means that we tried to get this out. Some very detailed responses, so a few people definitely read the plan, which is good. We had some positive comments that liked it, and we had some other ones that are questioning certain elements of it. It could be a specific policy. It could be kind of the commitment, I think is the way I was heard it phrased a couple of different times, or what's the commitment? Where's the clarity of what we're going to do with the plan? And I think part of that comes back to the style of the plan is more about vision and values than it is about direct action. So that can be part of the input that you're hearing tonight, is the style of the plan is really set up for the future councils to look at this and assess how do future decisions fit within the values that are expressed, and then make those decisions at a future date on specific actions. Now, clearly adopting the land use map sets the pattern now. That's not a deferred decision. So that's why it's going to be pretty important when we look at that we're all happy with that before we adopt it, and that we're not going to be looking to amend it really quickly as soon as it's adopted. So for tonight, really, any questions from council, any additional comments from council, any direction from the public feedback, I'd like to hear that tonight. If you need more time, that's also an option. The next meeting is really when I probably need to get direction to keep on track. I think we all want to get this done this year. And I think that we have through October to work through any minor changes we need to do.
Feedback for Kelly.
Kelly, you may or may not be aware that we received a really lengthy comments email this afternoon. Even before that, I was thinking that I would like to have until the next meeting to consider the input that we've received. I think that some of our commentators have made very detailed comments that I'd like to absorb and consider as a whole, as opposed to looking at them as units. So I would be supportive of us not making any decisions or giving direction tonight, but waiting until the next meeting to do so.
Other feedback? Questions?
I don't mind that idea. We did just today too, this afternoon, get a really long bit of feedback from Scott Renaud that I'd like to look at too, but yeah.
Okay.
That's a possibility.
Kelly, you did on page 2 of your staff report, you have a number of bulleted items that were issues that came up more than once. Is staff looking at those in terms of how those might get woven in, or are you looking to council to give you direction regarding that? Or
For the most part, I need council direction if you want to do something different. Very, very few of the comments were, this is unclear, like not unclear in a policy sense, but it's written where I don't know what it means. So I think if it's beyond I don't know what it means, it really needs direction from council to say you want to move it one way or the other. When we're done with comments, I have a couple comments about the next step with the maps, and I didn't mention the implementation chapter either. But from that bulleted list, I didn't have any. I was prepared to come in and say, here's the comments. This is what I think we need to fix. Didn't feel like with the range of comments we got that I could come in and say this has to be done, other than these map issues that we'll bring up at the next meeting.
as you and I talked about this afternoon, one of the conversations I had with an individual here in town, they asked about, I think, is it FLP? Is that what it is?
RLP,
RLP, which
low density park, which is manufactured home park.
Yeah, manufactured home or trailer park. Can you it's not referred to, and we talked about, is there some place where maybe it'd be appropriate to fit that in? Can you kind of comment on that in terms of how that's been considered or what should be done?
So in the land use chapter with each designation, whether it's RN 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is residential neighborhood, there was a corresponding zoning district listed for educational purposes, help people kind of put in context what's being described. And as it was pointed out, RLP, which is manufactured home park, it's not in one of those land use designations. Later on in the chapter, under the matrix of compatibility, RLP is listed as provisional within RN3, which is effectively your suburban, medium, and low density designations, as well as the high density designation. So it's not 100% clear, and that was why the comment was made, is where would RLP be allowed? I think if you followed current policy, it would be in RN3, subject to a rezoning and subject to a site plan review by council. That's what provisional would mean. It's not by right. It's something that you have to get approved. And then many of them are located right now in high density. So if you really thought about where the existing ones are, they're in high density designations. They're not in low density designations. So that could be a policy question you have there. Does it belong in a low density area, or does it belong in a high density land use designation? 1997 LUPP says it could be in either. We don't have that pattern, but it says it could be either. And then that's the question about whether we want to bring that forward or not.
So does the matrix give indication of whether or not it should be in low or high density? The matrix chart you referred
It says
to.
provisional for both.
For both.
So if that chart is what prevails from an administrative perspective, it would mean someone could apply for RLP zoning within an RN3 designation.
Do you have a recommendation or suggestion based on your experience?
I guess I would say very few comp plans take that specific type of land use into significant consideration. It's often relegated to a secondary status because it's not a common development pattern. It has a place in every community, but it's not something that most people are pursuing frequently. So I think it's really up to council. Do you want to direct it into a lot of different areas of the city, or do you want to make it more of a specific request? You have to come in and amend a map, make it high density, and address it that way.
Are you questioning whether the owl is on?
Yeah, theirs
Yeah.
has lights
I don't
on,
think it's on.
and this one keeps blinking periodically, its lights, but it,
Maybe it's going to sleep.
can you hear us, David?
No, he can't.
Yeah, I can hear.
Okay.
Oh, you can hear us?
Good.
Yeah,
Okay,
yes, I
good.
can.
Good. All
Okay
right.
then.
Never mind.
Sorry, Kelly. So do you believe it would be helpful to add that, like in the upper right-hand corner, I think it is in some of the charts for RN3?
If you put it there, it's very clear. The way it's currently structured, it feels like it's a relationship of this designation to the zones that are in the far right column of those. I think all the other ones are covered. So if it went into RN3, it'd be pretty clear that it's expected to be allowed. If
Or
it's
it
not,
could be in multiple ones though too. Is that your?
yeah, I think it would probably go into RN5 because that would be reflective of where most of them are. So if for sure, I would add it to the RN5 category. Then if you want to add it to others, that would clarify its applicability as well.
The reason I bring it up, council, is that that's potentially one avenue to pursue after to try and help us achieve one of the goals that council set, and that is really working towards workforce housing or affordable housing. And so manufactured housing may be an alternative, and if it's not really clear, it might people might just question, is that going to happen? And also the question is, someone who's going to buy a house in an RN3 area, they need to be aware that that may be something that could be developed, in an adjacent development area also. So it's more or less for being clear. And to me, that's just a minor. You and I talked about it. All this is adding that classification on two charts, and so it still was desired or considered to be included. It's just not quite as clear. That was all. So, all right. Other questions, comments? I don't disagree.
What's that?
You got a lot of.
I would need a motion, I think, to do that at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think from here on out, if there's an edit, it essentially needs to be by motion unless it's by a typographical kind of issue.
You recommend doing this then?
I think for sure it needs to be added to RN5, and then I would say, because that reflects existing conditions, and if you want to place it in another designation, then that should be the motion.
Okay.
John, could you help us articulate the motion? Or Kelly?
Based on the mayor's comments, I believe what he was suggesting was that the RN3 land use designation, which is essentially FSRL and FSRM zoning areas, and the high density zone designation of RN5 both include RLP in the chart of corresponding zoning districts.
I'll move that. So moved.
Second.
Move second. Any discussion?
I have a question. I think I'm looking at the chart now. Is it what I see are two lines labeled RN3. One is one is expansion and the other is multifamily. Am I reading that correctly?
What page are you on, David?
I'm on page 70. And I guess I'm wondering whether the line labeled RN3 multifamily is actually supposed to be RN5.
So yeah, there's a typo on the one that in parentheses multifamily. That's a typo. That should be RN5 multifamily because there's no RN. Yep.
So RLP is already shown as provisional for RN5 with that typo fix, correct?
It is, except for that's the clarity that the mayor is bringing up. Is this chart the one that prevails, or is it the pages preceding this that didn't list it and meant to exclude it?
I get it now. Thank you.
Yeah. So with the mayor's motion, RN3 and RN5 would clearly state that RLP is a corresponding zone. It would still be subject to our normal rezoning process and site plan review. That doesn't change.
Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. All right.
So Kelly, in terms of the next step, I agree with Gloria. It'd be nice to have a chance to digest all of this. So will this now be updated on the city's website? So in advance of that meeting, we could go there and review these materials?
What would be updated?
So, I mean, the feedback we received, so there was material that we received today. I just want to make sure that all of this is collected in one location so we don't miss anything.
So we can do, I mean, this is the staff reports online. We can bring that over to Plan 2040. The only input I think that we've received that you don't have was the email that we all got this afternoon.
And there was an email from Brent Haverkamp as well.
That was included on Friday.
It's in there.
Okay.
Yeah. So everything I had before Friday at noon is in your packet. The only thing I've gotten since Friday is Mr. Renault's email this afternoon.
And then one more question. So if someone says, well, I just didn't get my feedback in, can they still submit additional feedback? And I mean, at some point, this just becomes difficult to keep track of all the comments.
So, I mean, you can get feedback. We haven't even started the public hearing process. So I don't think it's possible to tell people they can't send comments in. We're not advertising for it any longer. But if someone called me and say, hey, I want to tell the council, don't do this, obviously we would take that letter from them and give it to you.
That's helpful. Okay, thanks.
It would seem, for clarity's sake, if someone tried to submit input online, it's not going to get through on the website. Is that correct, Kelly? Because it's been shut down.
I'd have to check with Eloise. I don't think we have shut it down. I just don't think we're advertising that it's open right now. Right. When we did this last time, we left it open for a really long time. The comments came down to nothing before we shut it off. But I don't think it automatically timed out on October 1st.
Because Tim has a really good question. The point is, what's the best pathway? Is it to send it to city council and to staff?
I still would, if somebody wants to give a comment, I would say push it to us.
Okay.
Let us collect it. It's sometimes you guys get it and I don't, and sometimes I'm CC'd. It'd be best to tell them to contact myself or Eloise or go to the Ames Plan 2040 website. That would be the best thing to do, especially for the next 2 weeks.
Okay.
And then after that, when we get into public hearing phase, we'll do it more formally where you have to submit written comments or come testify like you would at any other public hearing.
So by the end of this week, if you get 2 more comments, will you be forwarding that just to council, just as a trailer in terms of just letting us know that these additional came in?
I can do that. No problem.
I think that would make it simpler, because that way, in a memo saying these 3 more items came in, added to your packet, versus keep trying to chase it around. So,
Okay.
all right.
So when is the next time we'll be discussing this? I
On the
apologize.
26th of October, I'm going to specifically ask for motions by council to edit the map. So essentially, right, you accepted a version of a map in August. I'm going to have specific recommendations for changes that I'm going to ask you to vote on.
Okay.
And then that will be before it goes through a public hearing cycle.
Great, thanks.
And also any additional changes that you want to make to
So
the
if
Ames 2040 plan as well on that night.
So we're doing what Gloria says, we're not asking you to vote on it tonight.
Right. So if there's text
Gloria?
changes, other things that could still happen on the
Saying, wait.
26th.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Given the fact that this is on the agenda, is there anyone who's, I'm going to open up public comment. Is there anyone here in the audience that wanted to address council on this item this evening while you're here? Seeing none, close public input. So adequate to go ahead and just say we're just without a motion that we're going to just go ahead and put this on the agenda for in 2 weeks.
So I had two other comments just to
Please.
to catch up on the introduction there. So when we get to the map, one thing you're going to hear is what's the level of precision with the designations. So, and as Mr. Renault said, we can map everything down to an inch, but commonly comp plans are not meant to be that precise. They're meant to be a little flexible or fuzzy on the boundaries. Sometimes it's really precise that we know that property is one thing. Sometimes the lines go through it. And that's kind of showing that it might be at that back property line. Maybe it's at the front property line for whether it's a medium density or a low density use. Or I think one of the things we're gonna have a lot of conversation about is what's the natural area designations. Are those really land uses, or are those showing us our best intention of understanding the conditions on the ground that site-specific analysis is gonna truth out at a much higher level? Those are some of the questions you're gonna get as we get into the map. So one thing, the style of map you've been seeing has property lines on it. There are versions where you don't show property lines and you just use street center lines. So it's not as clear. I think a lot of people really have the comfort with property lines now, but we should understand that a little bit on the 26th. I understand this is not necessarily like to the inch level of precision with our maps. And those are some kind of comments that we'll get. The final thing that I alluded to in the staff report is you don't have one chapter of the plan. That's the implementation chapter. And we intentionally did that. We wanted to know where we were going as a plan, what was in it before we wrote how we were going to do it. And what I am suggesting to you, and you don't have to make this decision tonight because you'll see an example of it on the 26th, is I'm suggesting that because of the nature of the plan, we could catalog every action and policy in it and say it has a certain timeline or it's an ongoing activity or something like that. I felt like that'd be quite repetitive because many of them are about future applicability, not something that you have to do now. But I do think there's at least 10, maybe 15 significant projects that we can call through here and say, this is what really needs to happen. And council needs to make this on a list as a commitment of what we need to work on as a city, probably in the next 5 and 10 years. We won't list it out for 20, but we'll probably think of it as a 5-year and a 10-year kind of priority project. So some of these will be CIP projects. What's the first piece of infrastructure that needs to get built to unlock one of the growth areas? It might be the next plan that we need to do. Is it the park master plan now that we've said this is how we're going to grow? How are we going to run our parks? That's Parks and Rec's job to update their master plan. It's not the planning department. So those are the kinds of things that we're going to have to talk about. And I think it's very educational or at least transparent to the community then about what our priorities are. You'll still be making your decisions on an annual basis in the CIP or in the budget, but at least gives us a framework to know what we need to do next to carry through on the comp plan. And so that's my suggestion. That's what you're going to see is an implementation chapter that focuses more on this 10 to 15 kind of types of 10 to 15 list of projects rather than every action. But if you don't like that, we can go towards the action catalog. But that's where I'm headed. So any questions or thoughts about that now? That's the other new thing you'll get on the 26th. Okay.
Thank you, Kelly. All right, moving on to item 25, staff report on setbacks for accessory structures.
I have Benjamin coming up to present that item. Can you share screen? All right.
Good evening. Request before you tonight is for a text amendment to accessory structures. The background is that Grant Thompson of 407 Pearson Avenue, which is pictured on the aerial, in Country Club Estates, contacted the council regarding his inability by code to demolish and rebuild an existing non-conforming garage. And you can see that garage is right there. Accessory structure is considered non-conforming with regard to the setbacks, and Mr. Thompson has stated that the garage is deteriorating and he would like to replace it in the same location. Remodeling and rehabilitation of the garage is permitted by code, but replacement of a non-conforming structure is not. The current garage is roughly 6 feet from the rear property line and inches from the side property line. The minimum setback is in the RL zoning district is 20 feet from the rear, 8 feet from the side because it is a two-story house. Although the zoning ordinance has exceptions for accessory structures that allow reduced setbacks of as little as 3 feet, they do not apply in this situation. I'll get to that in a second. There is no allowance to rebuild or replace or place a structure at a setback of less than 3 feet anywhere within the single-family zoning district. The homeowner could build a new garage on the property by complying with the setbacks, but doing so would significantly reduce the usable area of the rear yard. The only way to do that would be to likely turn the garage and you'd have the cars coming in like this in order to meet the 20-foot rear yard setback, which would significantly eat up the rear yard. The non-conforming standards do apply uniformly across the city for all structures, and while having a garage is not technically a right that is guaranteed by the zoning ordinance, nor is it required, it is generally recognized as desirable along with having a usable yard or space on a property, and thus the request from the homeowner. We do allow for accessory structures to encroach into setbacks. As you can see here in this code excerpt, the kicker is the word wholly right here. And so this has been interpreted as that the accessory structure could only be 3 feet from a property line if it is wholly within the rear yard, meaning completely behind the primary structure. And this is not because it protrudes. There's this area here where it's both sort of side and sort of rear. So wholly would be completely behind the structure. Staff did a visual survey of both downtown, the Old Town area, and of neighborhood south of campus, and found that over 600 properties were likely have accessory structures that do not comply with the current standards out of a total of around 1,100. I didn't measure them or anything, just a visual survey looking at them. And we also looked at a number of ordinances from nearby cities, Des Moines, West Des Moines, Ankeny, and Iowa City. And those cities, every city does it differently, but generally 3 feet or 5 feet, or in the case of Iowa City, 3 feet and 5 feet, depending on its distance from the street, are the setbacks for accessory structures. There are several options before you tonight. The first one has 2 sub options. The simplest change that would be beneficial to the applicant is to adjust the rear yard exception to apply across the entire rear yard from side lot line to side lot line, regardless of whether it is partially in the side yard. This would mean there would be a 3-foot rear setback and a 6 or 8 foot side yard setback that applies across the city. And again, the 6 to 8 feet is depending on the number of stories of the structure. The second sub option is the council could consider changes to side yards that allow a reduced setback of 3 feet for both the rear and the side. Option 2 is to create reconstruction standards for non-conforming accessory structures, meaning that any structure such as Mr. Thompson's that is currently non-conforming could be grandfathered in perpetuity. You could take it down and rebuild it in that same location. And this would be an option that is beneficial to the individual property owners, but does not over time create conformity across all properties. So if you didn't already have one of these structures and had a similar yard, you would not be favored in that same way. Option 3 is a combination of both options 1 and 2. Option 4 would be to modify the minor area modification exceptions. The zoning ordinance allows for certain exceptions to be taken to the code, sort of a light variance in only very, very specific cases that the code enumerates. Adding language for accessory structures would be a minor change and could grant partial relief in non-conforming situations. And there would be a hearing. You would appear before the Board of Adjustment. The board would ultimately decide. This would allow for a case-by-case review with a public hearing, and this could be another option that would meet Mr. Thompson's situation. And the 5th option is to decline the request. Staff comments. Staff finds that option 1A has the greatest overall applicability for residential properties and clarifies for all properties that a 3-foot rear yard setback is allowed, even if it is not located directly, wholly behind the home. This would clean up a confusing section of code and provide intended flexibility for rear yard structures with minimal impact to adjacent properties. The council could also consider including 1B to allow for the 3-foot rear yard setback under the same rear yard circumstances. And I can take any questions.
So I want to clarify, there's another benefit to option 2 that you didn't mention. I think it's important to note that the community benefits from having buildings that are falling apart be replaced. My family lived on 9th Street. We had a 1911 house and a similar garage, and it was falling down. It was dependent on the other garage for its life support. We could not have taken that garage down. I would have been happy to have taken it down and built a new structure, but then there wasn't room to relocate it on my property. So I don't want to have city council pursue changes based on one property owner. No offense to Mr. Thompson, but we're not going to change the world because of one property. But I think we should look at this situation as an opportunity to do something really good. I'm leaning toward option 2, and these neighborhoods will then benefit from having decent looking accessory structures instead of these. My garage is still there because the people who bought the house, they couldn't take it down either. So in our newer subdivisions that have these lot lines, no one's building in them. But for the ones that are 100 years old, I guess I'm not going to lose any sleep about somebody rebuilding a garage, and allows them to maintain the balance of the use of their property. I'd love to hear people's thoughts. If that's a really bad idea, I'd love to hear why.
I liked option 2 as well, actually.
Just
I was
to
thinking,
add one point of clarity. If it's a shared garage where you're talking about a shared wall.
No, these bad boys are just leaning on each other.
Okay. So there is a style of garage in Ames where they literally have a shared wall.
Right.
Those are a wholly separate
Right.
category. Those are covered. This was just 2 things next to each other.
yes.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, I like option 2 as well. So I was thinking actually option 3, which is would be my preference. So that's parts of 1 and 2.
That's what I was thinking as well, just because it doesn't focus on only non-conforming garages, then it also allows opportunities for other types of garages.
Well, and I think, yeah, it just in the neighborhoods where we have that kind of density, like my house looks very similar, actually. Yeah, I would say to that picture in there, and I'm trying to imagine how that would work. But I think you're exactly right, Tim. We need to maintain these properties so that we can maintain good quality stock of housing and accessory structures too. So that's kind of where I'm leaning towards as option 3.
I have one of the garages that is within inches of the property line. You didn't go all the way over to Hayward when looking at scan, but there are a number of us over there that have a similar situation. And when I look at this, what I think is how much additional paving are we going to be putting in if people want to rebuild their garages? Because they'd have to move them, which means additional paving of permeable surfaces in order to create conformity. And I'm not sure why we want to create conformity. Is there a planning reason for us to seek conformity?
Well, yeah, once you establish the standard, you're expected to apply it equally across the city. You get obviously a lot of choice in what standards you establish, but I think that's the uniformity is expected for equal treatment. So you want to treat like to like. That's where we're coming from. And I think our discussion point was, so if I have the benefit of the non-conforming garage and my neighbor has no accessory building, so I forever get to be up to a property line and have that structure right there. They wouldn't be treated equally then. They'll have to abide by some setback standard. And that doesn't seem to quite sit right in terms of equal treatment of two like situations. I get it. The non-conforming person gets to benefit from what they've always had. The other person doesn't get to benefit. Maybe the combined 1 and 3 helps address that. I think just 2 doesn't get us very far in trying to help as many people as possible take advantage of investing in their property.
So if we were to make a motion on option 1 and 2 together, do you want us to, so it looks like option 1A and 1B are different and we should pick A or
yeah,
B.
I think, yeah, since we ended up breaking 1 into an A and a B,
Yeah.
whatever motion you have, if you could be
Should
clear
be
if it's
A
1A,
or B.
1B,
Okay.
how that would be done.
Yeah, thank you.
I want to just, there's a lot of nuances to zoning. I just want to run through kind of, Benjamin and I were talking about this. So, okay, so what really applies this thing if you rebuild it? So accessory garages, they're controlled by 25% of your rear yard being able to have accessory structures. That's cumulative. You could have 5 garages, you could have whatever, as long as it's under 25% of the total area behind your house. The other thing is its height restriction is based on the height of the structure. 1-story house, it can't be taller than a 1-story house. If it's a 2-story house, it maxes at 20 feet in height. A little strange, because it's not supposed to have habitable area anyway, so why do we have 2nd-story allowances for garages?
Storage.
Then the other thing is it's a max size of 900 square feet per garage. So that's a really large 3-car garage is what that is. So those are the 3 things that are going to be applying to most garages. There is a definitional issue that a garage is accessory, therefore it's supposed to be subordinate to a house. So that means your garage can't be bigger than your house. So if you are one of those people that has a 400 or 500 square foot house, even though you're allowed 900 square feet, you aren't going to be allowed to build a 900 square feet garage. Now, those are your basics for everybody. If you're non-conforming, universal rule in non-conforming structures is you do an addition, you can't continue to you can't expand or enlarge the encroachment. So if you are a 0 setback on a property line and we let you rebuild, you can't make the garage longer on that non-conforming setback. So that's going to be a factor in whether tear down and rebuild is really valuable. It's going to depend on how valuable maybe the dimensions of that old structure are. If it's a 16-foot deep garage that's 8 feet wide, probably not great value in rebuilding that in that non-conforming status. So those are just things to keep in mind. Again, if we do 1A and 1B, that's helpful to kind of mitigate some of the limitations on smaller lots to give a little more freedom.
I have a follow-up question to Ben. Ben, in your survey of the other communities, you did a nice job of summarizing these other communities on the setbacks for accessory buildings. But in terms of the ability to rebuild, what did you find from those other communities?
I did not specifically research for what you're asking, but you're asking for non-conforming structures with regards to setbacks. What were their regulations? Is that correct?
No, I'm asking about maybe I'm saying the same thing, but what we're talking about tonight, I think is very significant. The opportunity for people to rebuild. We've had little conversations about this throughout the years. Tonight, we're really going to take this on. I'm pretty excited, but I'm just curious if other communities have taken a similar approach, that the accessory structure could be rebuilt in the same footprint.
I did not research that. I looked specifically at just what were their setback
Okay, I was
allowances
just
for
curious if you
accessory
came across
structures.
that.
We
Thanks.
can look into that, but I did not research that.
Okay.
I'd say it'd be unusual. I'm not saying no one's ever done it, because normally non-conforming sections are about removing non-conformities, not protecting them. So I'm going to guess that most cities don't allow it. We can go back and see if we can uncover some people that have done that, or check the ones we just checked anyways. But
I think
it'd
I
be
saw it
few.
in West Des Moines, although I'm not seeing it now, but I remember thinking that West Des Moines had that.
A tear down and rebuild option. Okay, so we'll look at that, but it'd be few and far between that probably.
It seemed like a community, and I would say Iowa City because it's an older city. They're going to have a similar housing stock that we do. A city that's really developed quickly, and Ankeny, they may not have the same housing stock. So I don't know that this is necessarily a worthwhile thing to pursue. Could you walk us through, I apologize one more time, the difference between 1A and 1B? I just want to make sure we're on the same page on those differences.
This is the graphic that was attached to the report. So this is illustrating current code, not option 1A. So 1A would, the best way to think of it probably is the house on the left side of the diagram with the detached garage and the shed. So 1A would legitimize that 3-foot hatch setback in the back for any structure, whether it's literally behind the principal structure or not. 1B would give relief to the side setback. So you could either just let them have relief for the 3-foot in the rear, and you could also allow for a 3-foot encroachment or a 3-foot setback on the side under 1B. So that's the big one. 1B or 1A is really addressing this issue that the way the code was written, you can only be behind the principal structure, literally behind the principal structure, to get out of the 20-foot setback. And that can be the standard. It's not intuitive when you first think of it that way that's the standard, but that's how we see it right now.
So B, just to summarize, is going to benefit more people.
B is going to help the narrower lots that are trying to get the garage to work to maneuver around the house and be able to get a fairly straight alignment into the garage.
But theoretically, we could do option 1A, 1B, and 2.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is option 3.
So that'd be the most liberal version, where you're letting essentially garages go into a 3-foot setback situation as long as it's behind the home.
Mm-hmm.
And by that, we mean in anything behind the plane of the house.
You mean wholly behind the home?
Yeah, it have to be. Get a cursor. Yeah. So I think the way we understand 1B would mean anything that's located behind this edge of the home. So even if you could see it from the street, it would benefit from a 3-foot setback, both side and rear under 1A and B. That's what we're trying to get clarity on, if that's what we expected.
So I know you talked about Campus Town, you talked about, Old Town. Is it correct that you're suggesting that these changes would apply to any and all housing in the entire city? Or is it just going to be overlay areas in specific areas?
So under 1A and 1B, it'd be universal across the city, RL, FSRL, FSRM, and any of those places, UCRM.
But I think I just don't think that there's as many of those kinds of accessory buildings in more newer subdivisions, because they never would have got a building permit.
Or they're not in poor
or-
shape yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or,
Well, but I
or-
think they wouldn't have been built there because of the building permit.
Right. But I mean, most off, if you need to replace a garage, it's a 100-year-old garage. You typically, right? It's the older ones.
I'm just trying to encourage council to consider the fact that the vision, I think, is pretty specific in terms of small, older neighborhoods, and that it'd be beneficial to make sure that we think about newer neighborhoods that maybe they wouldn't have put on, a garage, but now they're going to stick one, way in the back corner.
But they can't.
Well, they will be able to if this change is made.
So
They partially can now. It's that question of whether it's directly behind the home or whether it's offset a little bit where it's visible from the street. That's really
Yeah,
I mean, we
so
have the 3-foot allowance now. It's more limited.
Yeah, just to make sure that we're not just focusing on this one case or these limited cases. And I understand that. I appreciate the challenges that exist in older neighborhoods. I'm not arguing to not do this. It's just more or less when it gets blanketly applied over the entire community, there may be some unintended consequences or not expected consequences in some other areas that I think should be thought through at least.
What's kind of unique, I mean, you're going to talk about FSRL now.
Well, I was just going to say, I think the benefit to newer neighborhoods is that this is accessory structures of all sorts. So right now, gazebos and, tool sheds and anything else that's in your rear would also have to meet if it's not wholly behind the house, would have to be, typically 20 feet from the rear or 6 to 8 feet from the side, which, for a tool shed or a garden shed, that's, I would say, not the ideal location for, most people want to put it in the corner, I would say.
Yeah, so the point is that will change. So the point is if a person has a larger lot and they want to put it far back in the corner that's not hidden behind a home within 3 feet of their property lines, they'll be allowed to be doing it if this change is implemented universally.
Yeah, so we put this particular one at the attached garage in just to help illustrate what the mayor's talking about. So this would be your normal configuration, right? You build your garage, you probably took up the whole width of your lot. You're not going to be building a garage in the rear, but you could have these other things. So that's the question. So right now you can do this 3-foot setback on the rear. If you adopt 1B, now that shed can squeeze over to 3 foot on the side also instead of 6 feet. So that's probably your modern lot right there. And that's where the trade-offs would be is your side yards get to go down to 3 under 1B.
So if I could make a comment, this is interesting. This trade-off between wanting to liberalize the use of the space and these in what we're thinking of as constrained lots, but it would also apply to larger lots as well. And then there is a trade-off there. And by adding in 1B, we're saying that there are a lot more configurations that are not possible. And so we might get more gazebos or things that the neighbors never anticipated being built there before. So I guess I'm leaning towards asking for option 1A and option 2. I think that they both have their place. And a final comment here is it feels kind of good to be liberalizing the use of this land, but we're not adding any more people. We're not creating any more housing by doing any of this. It's just garages, right, and other structures. So I'm not sure we want to sort of maximize the additional uses that we're creating here. I think they're finding middle ground might be the way to go.
So John, and thanks for that, David. So John, 1A then, I appreciate your comment very much on unintended consequences. So 1A would create some limitations so that someone says, I don't really like my neighbor, so I'm just going to put my gazebo or whatever as close as I can to that lot line, and I don't care about them. So it creates some spacing. If we went with 1A, we wouldn't have as many issues with that as we would if we went with 1B. Am I saying that correctly?
Well, you're getting at the heart of what my concern was, is that you start having people sticking things back in corners that, some places not in Ames, there's larger lots. And the point is that's going to look really strange to have things way back in the corner. And there's places where the house doesn't go all the way across, the front of the lot. I know a lot of construction, there is that situation. I haven't thought through all this. I just want to make sure that before we just blanket, or before you just do blanket across the whole community, just make sure we think through how it might affect some of the newer neighborhoods. That's all.
But 1A would be less impactful. Kelly, maybe that's Ben. 1A would be less impactful.
It would not address the side setbacks then.
Okay.
It'd still be a 3-foot
Less
setback.
impactful by 3 feet on the side.
So anyway,
Say that again, Bronwyn.
It would be less impactful by 3 feet on the side. Good, takes it from 6 to 3 on the
Right.
side.
So
That's
that-
all.
Yeah.
And by less impactful, I think we want to be clear that 1A and 1B both address sort of different aspects of the setbacks. And I think it's less impactful to choose only one of them. Okay, so that's what I'm leaning towards 1A.
So let me just throw something else in here, and maybe this doesn't matter, but we're going to be discussing accessory dwelling units, I believe, with the Plan 2040.
Eventually.
Depends on your implementation chapter.
So my question would be, if, we revise this, it says accessory buildings in residential
You're
areas.
gonna have a whole set of new standards for accessory dwelling units.
Okay.
The current language doesn't work. So
Okay.
All right.
I wouldn't worry about that issue. You'll have a whole section all tailored to that thing if it happens.
Good. That's what I wanted to hear.
And we're going to have some readings on this to get some other public input. Are we doing public input tonight on this?
Yeah.
Yeah. So whatever you do tonight, it goes to the Planning and Zoning Commission. We'll try to notify our neighborhood association list to let them know many of the registered neighborhoods are the neighborhoods that have detached garages. And then I'll come back for a hearing with you as well.
Okay, cool.
All right, open up public comment. And I have a card from Grant Thompson. Grant, you're invited to address council. And if you try and keep your comments to 3 minutes or less, appreciate it.
Thank you. Mayor and council, thank you for taking up this issue and having the city staff spend their time looking at this. In their quick visual survey of the 2 neighborhood areas, they identified in both greater than 50% of the properties that this issue pertained to. So we could expand the parameters. It was mentioned, Councilmember Betcher, this would apply to you if they had scanned over far enough into your neighborhood. So I think one way or another, something does need to be done. In terms of kind of the modern aesthetic of homes and having the attached garage, and oftentimes in newer construction, having that at the forefront of the house, you have that monster garage that you roll up to instead of the front door. That width of the width of the home, if we don't address that rear setback, it's kind of, you're playing apples and oranges. It used to be you had the house, you had the carriage or the garage and back, and it was kind of tucked away. And so now we're calling those accessory structures, whether it's a shed, gazebo, or garage, and kind of all falls under that same thing. So if the whole idea is you don't want to see the garage, well, we've totally architecturally gone away from that, right? So that's one issue. With regards to the 1A, 1B, certainly 1A would help in my situation. And I know we aren't just doing this for me. I'm just making the point. 1B, if we don't also get that 3 side yard setback, based on the height of my home, 8 feet, that's the width of my driveway. So I would still have to move my garage were I to deconstruct it, would still have to move it completely over to make that side yard setback. That then physically does not work for the turning radius of modern vehicles. So then we do get into that extra paving area, eating up the whole backyard, et cetera. So I understand and I appreciate the comment of, if we change these, not only what does it do for the old neighborhoods, but how does that potentially affect newer neighborhoods that were built under different building standards? Vice versa could be said about when your current planning and zoning was put in place. The ripple effects of, well, how does that unintendedly affect these older neighborhoods that were built prior to your current zoning regulations? Equally, that's a problem. So if the idea is we want compact communities, we want to reuse and reinvest in our current building stock, et cetera, the ability to kind of put back what was there seems to have value.
Grant, I'm sorry, would you also just,
Sorry,
I forgot.
Grant Thompson, 407 Pearson Avenue.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I just want to make sure I understand something he just said real quick.
Yes.
You said that if we went with option 1A, but not option
Right.
1B, you'd have to move your garage. But is that true also if we did option 2?
Option 2, if there's an opportunity for however that gets reviewed on a case-by-case basis, either if it's whatever the non-conforming edge, if that stays put, I could potentially leave the north edge and the west edge in place.
Okay.
I guess depending on how
it
that
could be
gets written.
rebuilt exactly where it is if we did option 2.
It didn't get bigger on
Not bigger,
on a non-conforming setback. That
but
yes,
exactly the same as it is
I had the same question. I think you'd be able to just rebuild in the same footprint.
if we do option 2.
Right.
Yes.
I think the point that your staff is making is, by the way it's written, option 2, the north edge, the non-conforming edges couldn't get larger.
Can't grow, yes.
It can't.
But you could replace them exactly as they are now.
I think we're both talking about slightly different things here. So, for example, if y'all, I'm a landscape architect by training, by the way, so I'm used to thinking about some of this stuff. If you take 1A, where you would have a 3-foot setback, I currently have 6 feet behind the garage. So I could conceivably, the north would stay the same, the back. Yeah, I mean, I could extend the south edge of the garage into my rear yard, conceivably, assuming I meet all of the other area and size requirements. But the non-conforming edges, in this case, the north edge and the west edge, would have to stay put.
Right. No, yeah, I was just
Right.
saying that you could rebuild them exactly as they are now.
I mean,
with option 2.
that would satisfy me for this case, but again, we're not writing this for me.
Right.
Yeah, and I think
Thank you. No, that clarifies. Then.
I think the issue that you're getting at is that if it's a small garage that is built for, say, a Model T, because it was built in the 20s or something, then demolishing it and rebuilding it isn't particularly useful.
I keep my bikes in my garage, so I don't know.
Just anecdotally, the property to the south of us, you don't see it because the aerial here is cut off. They did tear down a garage. This was the prior owners. They understood that they couldn't put something back up, so now they have 2 plastic sheds at the end of their driveway. So they don't have car storage, and if you're talking aesthetics and what you want in the city, I don't know that that really does it either. But that is an effect of your current practice.
Okay. Thank you, Grant.
Thank you.
Give the card to.
Just give the card to her. If you share your name and your address, and you may proceed.
Sherry Riley. I actually don't live in Ames, but I work in Ames. 53-273 110th Street in Story City. I just want to speak to the effect on neighbors. Neighbors buy homes based on what they see when they buy it. And so if these accessory buildings are already there, I don't see how that's an issue for them if it's rebuilt with a very similar footprint. I bought a house on 14th Street when I was living in Ames. And I mean, my shed did not conform to anything like that. But I bought it because of the charm of the neighborhood. I bought it because, the nice neighbors. So I really don't think the neighbor issue is significant. And that's all I really wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, close public comment. Council?
So I'll take a shot at this. I'll move option 1A and option 2.
Or second? Moved and seconded. All right. Discussion?
So I think this is one of the funnest things we have done in a really long time. And I don't know if the newspaper is going to care about this. This is not a very sexy headline, but this is going to impact a lot of people. And hopefully we'll see some reconstruction of some dilapidated structures that will really impact the community. So I'm pretty excited about this. So maybe John, your point is well taken. Maybe there'll be some unintended consequences that we'll come back and fine tune this, but I think we're moving in the right direction, and I appreciate staff's work on this.
Okay. All right. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. All right. Next steps, Kelly, if you want to just share that. And if
Yeah, so we'll probably get to the Planning and Zoning Commission in November with a draft ordinance and then proceed to an ordinance with the city council. I don't think we need to come back and review language with you one more time before we go through that. I think we understand where we're headed now. So
Thank you.
And
All
the
right.
neighborhood organizations will get contacted about the P and Z meeting.
Yep, we'll do that.
Great.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Item 26, discussion of home American Rescue Plan grant agreement. Vanessa.
Good evening. Well, you have before you a grant agreement that came in the mail prior to me having an opportunity to get through some training. HUD, again, got the notification out early, but we did talk to council. I think we notified you back in April that we would be possibly receiving this $1.2 million of home ARP money. And this is, of course, in addition to our regular CDBG and home funding. We're not the only entitlement in Iowa that is receiving funds under this program. And I believe there's a lot of cities that's receiving ARP money that's under a totally different umbrella of the President's American Rescue Plan. This particular grant agreement it allows us to supposedly give jurisdictions more resources to address their homeless assistance needs by hopefully creating affordable housing, non-congregate housing, providing some tenant-based rental assistance, some supportive services, and it has what they call qualifying populations that could qualify, which would be from homeless, at risk of homeless, domestic violence, fleeing domestic violence, family homelessness, even serving veterans and people of greater risk of housing instability. So it has a variety of options available to it. Also, it has some basic categories, activities, which include production of housing or preservation of affordable housing, again, tenant-based rental assistance and supportive services, including homeless prevention, development of non-congregate housing, non-congregate shelter for individuals and families. This is a very interesting grant program, and the guidelines for the program are some I've never seen before, honestly, and I've seen a lot of grants. The program will provide up to 15% for administrative fees. However, we're not eligible to get that. We can only get up to 5% once we return the grant agreement to be able to begin the process of it, begin the administration. One of the big issues that we would have to do under this grant is to create what they call an allocation agreement, allocation plan. I'm still getting trained on exactly what that would include and how we would go about making sure that we would meet the guidelines. And also another component of this is that we have to amend our current 21-22 annual action plan. So they didn't want to go to 22. It's this year's plan that we would have to revise. Like with anything else that we do when we get a grant, we're certainly going to be doing public feedback, public comments, and so forth regarding the process, how we're going to go about it, what it looks like, who can apply, what that process is. I had mentioned that several key groups I would need to meet with, other than legal, finance, purchasing. We talked about meeting with asset, because this certainly is a category for a lot of the eligible asset organizations, and so getting feedback from them on that, and looking at the variety of programs that are available. It's likely we might suggest doing a competitive grant application. I know they're doing that similar across the country. Even Story County is doing their op funds that way as well. So that would make the more sense. So having those types of organizations work with us as far as looking at grants and determining that would be what that process would be about. And so tonight, it is just basically returning the grant agreement so that we can at least apply for the 5% funding to start the process. Not saying that it's something I'm going to start right away. We have until September 30th, 2030 to spend all of the funds. We do have some priorities that might be a little bit ahead of this, like we're trying to finish our CAPER. We're still working, trying to get our Baker subdivision going. We're still working on our current COVID 1 and 3, and we also have our current COVID round 2. So this is just another opportunity, but because the grant agreement came now, I wanted to make sure it came onto your attention, and that if you're interested in us pursuing it, then we would need to authorize the mayor to sign the grant agreement, and we would move forward before there. And of course, at each step that we would come with some decisions, we would bring it before the council. We would certainly be getting public input prior to the allocation plan. And also we have to do public input because we have to update our action plan. So with that, I can entertain any other questions that you might have.
Questions?
So Vanessa, is there a possibility that there are strings attached to this that we don't know about, that you think that might be a factor as we consider this?
Well, there was some language in the letter that the mayor got that I had not seen before, and there was making sure that we understood that this is a legally binding contract, and that we are going to be responsible for the entire administration of it, and that if funds aren't correctly spent, they will have to be paid back with non-federal funds. And there is a lot potential, even more so because it's home. Home is a lot more complicated in administering than just a regular CDBG. So I will be going back again and making sure that I understand all of the intricacies and complexities of this particular grant, so that when we go out to get public feedback, and also if we start the grant process, that agencies or individuals interested in applying really understand what the complexities and what the responsibilities if they were to be able to be awarded these funds.
And I went through this material. I didn't see any requirement for a city match.
Nope, there is no match under the home opera program. That's just under our regular home program.
Okay. So we've got the full agreement. We just haven't gone through all of it. It's not that they haven't sent us all of the rules.
The agreement is kind of separate from the rules. There is like over 200 pages of rules. And this is just the funding agreement that the city has to sign in order to initiate that you're interested in receiving the money.
But I apologize. So we have the rules.
Yes.
And legal is reviewing the rules, and you're reviewing the rules.
Well, I'm just going through the training and through the rules. I haven't done much more than that, Tim. I went through 4 training modules these last couple of weeks, and that's as further as I've gotten yet. So I haven't had a chance to discuss any of those particular things with legal at this time.
Okay. It just feels a little different. We're agreeing on something. We don't fully have an understanding of all the terms. And that's not a criticism of you. It's just, it's 200 pages.
That's the way the federal government's doing it now, unfortunately.
So normally you don't enter into a contract if you
That's
don't
right.
know what the rules are.
I mean, would it be fair, Vanessa, that the rules are when you do spend the funds that you're spending it appropriately. It's not, there's, like you asked before, there's strings attached. We signed this agreement. If we don't spend the funds, it's not making us to spend the funds.
Deny receipt of the funds after, even though we accept.
Right. The rules are like Vanessa has to work with on every
The
federal
rules is to
program.
determine the eligibility, how they will be processed, how funds are dispensed, whether we do them in advance, whether we contract it out. I mean, we have to, it also includes fair housing rules. We have environmental rules that apply, procurement rules that apply. So it's the basic rules that we have when we do grants. This is just a little bit more stipulatory because it's specifically for categories, and we have to make sure that people qualify. And
It's certainly a different world out there. You know, the CARES funds, we received half those funds we actually have deposited in the city already, and all the rules don't even know how to use it yet. They've given it to us before we even have the rules written. That's half
yeah,
the
our CARES
14
fund, we
million.
got the money before we
crazy?
got the rules.
Yeah. So we have $7 million deposited with the city without the rules even being finalized.
But you're
It's a different
accountable.
world out
So
there.
if we spent that 7 million, we're still accountable for whatever future rules are adopted.
Yeah, we gotta be careful.
why
We haven't spent a dime until we.
Yeah, because we don't really want to.
That's what I tell you.
spend
It's
it
a different
correctly.
world out there. That's not how you and I would do business. I understand.
So I think Vanessa is saying this is that we aren't going to spend it till we know what we're getting into. This agreement doesn't commit you to spending the 1.2
Correct.
million. You're accepting it, knowing that Vanessa is going to be responsible and come back with a plan, and we're going to know what we're getting into before we spend it down.
I think they want to know if we don't want it, they'll allocate it to some other city. So I think we want to at least make that commitment.
And like I said, this agreement came out before I even went to training.
Right.
Just, it's out there. Just like the other opera money is out there, and cities are having, working on how they're going to spend it, getting comments. Yeah, this is a little quicker, but still, I wanted to make sure that it came to council because we got the grant agreement quicker than I anticipated. And so we do have to respond to HUD. And so that's why I'm bringing it.
Thanks.
Other questions?
Vanessa, is the last bullet item on the first page of the report, the purchase or development of non-congregate shelter for individuals and families experiencing homelessness, is that a bricks and mortar item like home typically includes?
Yes, that would be bricks and mortar. The one thing that I know for sure that this doesn't cover, it doesn't cover any type of home buyer assistance or home building. It's all shelter, homelessness related. It's no home buying or assistance with home purchasing or building.
Do you know if it covers daycare? Somebody asked us that.
I don't think this one particularly covers daycare, but the other one we're working on from the state may.
Okay.
All right, this one uses a term like defined or targeted population. Is that what its rules are set up? It uses a different terminology.
It has qualifying populations, which stipulate those in those categories that I listed in paragraph number 3, homeless, fleeing domestic violence, human trafficking, veterans, housing instability, those categories of people.
Yeah.
So daycare is highly unlikely to be under that umbrella.
Yeah, it could be the state one there that thing about.
Vanessa, I think you received a copy of an email from Loris Olson this afternoon. Council got it also, and she posed some questions. Since she said she couldn't attend, so I thought I'd just ask them. And does the city set the framework in terms of how the funds would be? I mean, who could the funds be allocated to?
Actually, Mayor, we have not done any of that at all. All I'm bringing tonight is the actual grant agreement that we got in the mail.
The point is that that's yet to be determined, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, sir.
Okay.
Also,
The city council make that decision.
right. Yes. We certainly will, again, like we do with all of our grant funds, we will go out for
Right.
public comment, public feedback before we go to the next steps. Council will also be an integral part of that. We may do it similar to how we do our 5-year consolidated plan with the public feedback. It is going to be a longer process
Right.
than we've had before. So, yes.
So just so I can respond back to this, to Laura, we're just approving, receiving these funds, and then the rules or the criteria for dispersion of those will still be forthcoming. And they, of course, are subject to the nice short 200-page long rules that you'll get that we'll have to follow. Is that accurate?
Well, it's something that, I just want to let council know there's something that is a process to go through to
Yep.
make sure that we understand all of our responsibilities when we sign this a grant agreement. And that's what my responsibility is to you and to the public. So
In the future, there'd be an
Intended.
opportunity for people to come and offer input or comments in terms of,
certainly.
Yeah.
Certainly.
okay, all right. Any other questions? I will open up public comment. Does anyone want to address council on this particular item?
I have a question for Vanessa. Do you know if any other groups have this proposal before? Any other town or anything like that?
Well, all of the entitlements in Iowa receive their own specific funding along with the state. The state of Iowa received 29 million that they will be distributing to cities under 50,000. So Ames is just one of 11 entitlements in Iowa, but it was approved for entitlements across the country.
Thank you. Close public input then. Council, entertain a motion on resolution authorizing the mayor to sign the 2021 Home Investment Partnership American Rescue Plan grant agreement in the amount of $1,269,248.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Roll call.
Gordon,
Nay.
Junk,
Aye.
Corey,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
Meeting Hanson,
Aye.
Betcher.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And up and entertain a motion to direct staff to proceed with next steps.
So moved.
Second.
Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 But I
Any
just
oppo-
want to remind council
Oh,
that
sorry.
next steps may be a while.
Any opposed or abstaining?
Nay.
Okay, motion carried. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, it may be a while. Like I said, we have some other priorities too. And again, I want to make sure that I get some thorough feedback of the rules, and all the other entitlements are getting together, talking about regulations with HUD as well. HUD's been very helpful to say they could help us with each stage of it. And so I certainly want to take the time to make sure that I do that.
Okay.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thanks for your efforts on that. All right, moving on to item 27, Public Works. Any questions for staff on item 27? Entertain a motion and resolution awarding the contract to A&B Construction Limited of Harper, Iowa to move existing hoop framing from 700 East 5th Street to 309 Carnegie Avenue and erect a 50 by 200 foot hoop building for cold material storage, an amount of $63,662.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Junk,
Aye.
Corey,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
Meeting Hanson,
Aye.
Betcher,
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Thank you. Moving on to item 28, hearing on voluntary annexation with non-consenting property owners located north of Lincoln Highway and west of Ames corporate limits to Boone County along North 500th. Gillen.
So as the mayor just introduced the item, we're looking to annex the property here outlined on the aerial photo. We have the initial petition was for one property. City Council initiated this to include two property owners that own three other properties to make it an 80-20. As we're allowed under state law, we can do that for uniform boundaries. In this case, it would create uniform boundaries along County Line Road. Otherwise, we would have a segment or a peninsula that comes out to the street, and we would have two properties on each side of that are still in county jurisdiction, yet to the south would be uniformly in the city. So we thought that met the standard for uniform boundaries. Staff is recommending approval. to move forward with this. If city council approves this, it does have to go to the city development board as an 80-20 annexation.
Can you tell us why planning and zoning voted not to recommend?
I was at the meeting and I didn't recall a discussion before the motion. I looked at the minutes again this afternoon as well. There isn't really a statement by anyone that made the motion to say why they made the motion for 80-20. There was no testimony offered or public comment offered at the meeting to say don't do the 80-20. It came under the own volition of a member of the board.
Okay.
All right, declare the public hearing on the voluntary annexation with non-consenting property owners in the subject location to be open. Is there anyone that wants to address council on this item? Seeing none, declare the public hearing to be closed. Is there a motion on resolution approving annexation of property?
I would move alternative 1.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? Roll call.
Corrier,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
Edie Hanson,
Aye.
Fetcher,
Aye.
Garten,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Very good. Anything else, Kelly, on that?
That's it.
All right, thank you. Moving on to item 29, ordinances. Entertain a motion on third passage and adoption of ordinance number 4449, removing all parking requirements for auditoriums, theaters, stadiums, and arenas within the downtown service center and campus town service center zoning districts.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Martin,
Aye.
Edie Hanson,
Aye.
Fetcher,
Aye.
Garten,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Corrier,
Aye.
Thank you. And entertain a motion on third passage and adoption of ordinance number 4450 as previously amended, creating the Resident Police Advisory Committee.
Move on third. Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Edie Hanson,
Aye.
Fetcher,
Aye.
Garten,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Corrier,
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Thank you. And council, we have one item under disposition of communications to council and brought to my attention that we also got an email from Lorna Carroll. Since the fact that we're going to have a workshop next Tuesday night relative to the topic of her email, I'll let her know that it'll be.
Mayor, I emailed her and let her know, and she's planning on coming to that.
Very good. Thank you. All right, then we just have one memo from city manager regarding the organized waste collection service in the Ames community. Steve, you want to highlight any points or just restate what's on here or not?
I remember you referred to me a letter from Susie Petra, who has suggested the city consider dealing with our local garbage collectors in a different way. Right now, we have what's known as an open system where the individual customers can choose their provider or garbage collector. This has caused a lot of extra traffic, noise, and probably wear and tear on our streets because services are being provided by multiple haulers in your neighborhood. She's asked that we consider going to an organized collection system, and that's where the city itself would try to coordinate the hauling of the private haulers, maybe through establishing what I'll refer to as a franchise or bidding it out different parts of the community. City staff is intrigued by this. They could have a lot of benefits. I do believe, though, the team I would use to study this is engaged in the solid waste recovery system right now, and I would ask that I would like to pursue this, but I would like to wait until we complete the other study before we dedicate staff to this particular project. We're going to have to determine the legal authority that we have to do this in the state of Iowa. I think we want to check with other cities who have done this throughout the country, not the state of Iowa, see what they've learned about the pros and cons of going to this kind of system, organized system. And finally, I think we want to talk to our haulers who will be impacted by it if we start going from 9 haulers down to just one who's selected by the city government. So it will be a one that I think should be done internally. It'll take some time, and I would hope that you would assign this after we complete the other study. Now, I do believe that there is some tie-in to this study as we look at the different options for the solid waste recovery, waste energy study. It's something that I think we should inform our current consultant on, the sensitivity that if we are able to franchise or enter into agreement with one or multiple companies and dictate certain things, maybe pricing, right? We could ask them to put pricing mechanisms in there that would discourage consumption, or perhaps there would be a requirement they engage in source separation, right? And something like that. That may impact the size of the project we're working with. So I think we're going to have some discussions with them to warn them and tell us if certain things happen, would that change what they're recommending, at least the size and magnitude of the solution they're recommending. So if that makes sense, we'll communicate with them, but I don't think we'll have the final study done as it relates to this moving to an organized system. Anybody have questions about that? Right.
All right. Very good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do you want a motion on that one?
I think you want to, I think let's get on the record. You want me to engage in this study, looking at moving from the open to the organized system at the time you complete your waste energy study.
Oh.
Motion, wasn't it?
I would move that we direct staff to proceed with this study at the timing that the city manager has recommended. But in the meantime, that we also broach this topic with our current consultant on the waste to energy audit so that they can give us any feedback they might.
Right.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Thank you. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Carried. Thank you. Council comments. David?
Hi, thank you. One thing caught my eye. It was among the public comments submitted for Ames Plan 2040. And this was a resident who lives in the Creekside neighborhood, who as I understand it, is mostly expressing concern about lack of sidewalks on either side of South 16th Street there. And I think I understand the city policies that have, the historical ones and the current ones that have led to this situation. Unfortunately, the person who wrote the letter did not leave contact information. But still, I think it would be helpful if council could hear what the situation is regarding sidewalks on South 16th Street in this neighborhood, and how that is likely to be resolved under current city policies, just so that we're on the same page and that we're aware of any specific constraints or things the council would need to do in order to ensure that that street is brought up to our current standards eventually. So I guess I would move to ask the city manager to write a brief memo to council addressing the issue of sidewalks raised in this comment.
Second.
So do we know this already, though? Isn't this University Institutional Road on South 16th?
It's where 4-lane exists right now.
I think he's talking to east of that. I think that's what they're talking about.
Exactly, yeah. I think this is on the city street.
It's across the street. It's across the street from the park.
It is on the south side. It's between Wasabi, you know, the new restaurant Wasabi.
Yes.
And the bike path.
Before
Okay.
you get, yeah.
Okay.
It's not the institutional road.
Okay.
That will be taken care of. But
Is it part of what, didn't the city enter into an agreement to make improvements on that part of South 16th? Or did we just discuss it and not move forward with it?
the university, we're going to widen and we'll take care of that.
Yeah,
This is
but it
not
doesn't
part of
have anything to do with the sidewalks as part of that project.
Well, this is not the area that's missing, though. Are you asking the area we're going to widen that would normally been the university's property?
Yes.
Yeah, I think we're going to handle that with a shared use path. Probably will be built in to the an off-street shared use path.
On the north side of South 16th. Because there's one on the south side now.
You can put it in.
Well, yeah, okay. But that's not the area that's the comment is about, is all I'm trying to say.
Okay.
But let me give you the memo and I'll tell you how you're going to, how you'll be able to deal with it all the way out.
We can do or should be.
Yeah, perfect.
All right.
I'll get it for you. All the way out to university. We'll tell you how we're going to handle it.
Great.
Or not handle it.
Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Anything else? David?
Thanks. That's all tonight. Thank you.
Thanks. Trevor?
No comments tonight.
All right. Rowan?
Nothing for me. Thanks.
Amber?
Nope, nothing for me.
Rachel?
Nothing for me.
Speaking of bike infrastructure, next Tuesday is our city workshop. I don't remember that we've ever invited the public to have a specific conversation on bike infrastructure. Runners, walkers, bikers, this is a great opportunity. So encourage people to take advantage of that. Come next Tuesday, offer feedback.
Thank you. Gloria.
Tomorrow, early voting starts at the county auditor's office for those people who want to drive to Nevada and cast a ballot.
Okay.
That's all.
Well, I have a question for Trevor. Is there anything going on this week at campus?
Yes, homecoming starts this week.
Homecoming. What's going on this week at campus? And what happens on Sunday?
Sunday is the parade, I believe. And I'm not sure who all here will be there, but I'm pretty sure I signed up to go. That's be a good time. There'll be a bunch of organizations there, I know. This Thursday, some of the events start, I know, for the Greek community and other communities that are involved. And those go all the way through next week, ending with, is it next Saturday? Campaigning and rewards.
Yeah.
Or awards.
Yeah. There's a homecoming parade downtown here, 2 p.m. on Sunday. So, all right. That's all I have. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
We are adjourned. Thank you.